Looking for ways to reach leaders and decision makers? The CyberWire reaches over 50,000 readers and over 250,000 unique listeners each week, making us the largest B2B cybersecurity podcast network. Feature your brand with the source that top security leaders choose. Start filling your funnel today by visiting thecyberwire.com/sponsorship. That's thecyberwire.com/sponsorship. The PurpleUrchin freejacking campaign, Bluebottle activity against banks in Francophone Africa, the PyTorch framework sustains a supply chain attack, 2022's ransomware leaderboard, Cellphone traffic as a source of combat information, FBI Cyber Division AD Bryan Vorndran on the interaction and collaboration of federal agencies in the cyber realm. Our guest Jerry Caponera from ThreatConnect wonders if we need more carrots than sticks in cybersecurity regulation, and two incommensurable views of information security. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Thursday, January 5th, 2023. We begin with news from researchers from Palo Alto Network's Unit 42, who this morning released a report on threat actor Automated Libra. They're the gang behind the PurpleUrchin freejacking campaign. Automated Libra is based in South Africa and targets cloud platforms in what is known as freejacking, or the process of using free or limited-time cloud resources to perform crypto mining operations. It's a special case of cryptojacking. The PurpleUrchin campaign was first discovered in October of last year. The gang was seen using play-and-run tactics, defined by the researchers as using cloud resources and not paying the cloud platform vendor's resource bill. The actors created and used fake accounts with falsified or stolen credit cards, which held unpaid balances. Operations were seen peaking in November, with 3 to 5 GitHub accounts being created every minute. More than 250 gigabytes of container data were analyzed by the researchers, and it was found that the group heavily leveraged DevOps automation techniques, such as continuous integration and continuous development. Heroku, Togglebox, and GitHub were observed to be cloud service platforms the gang used, but data traced threat actor activity back to August of 2019, and that trail showed activity spread across a broad range of cloud providers and crypto exchanges. Researchers at Symantec released a report this morning detailing the continuation of cybercrime group Bluebottle's activity in Francophone countries, most recently observed against banks in French-speaking parts of Africa. Symantec says Bluebottle seems to be a continuation of activity tracked by Group IB as operator, most recently documented in a report from the group in November of last year. The researchers at Symantec find that the current activity shows a lot of carryover from what had been seen earlier, but there are some departures, some developments in Bluebottle's technique. There are some indicators the attackers may have used ISO files as an initial infection vector. The criminals are now using the commodity malware Goo Loader in the first stages of their attack, and there are now indications that Bluebottle is now abusing kernel drivers to disable defenses. Symantec says the cybercrime gang makes extensive use of living-off-the-land, dual-use tools and commodity malware, with no custom malware deployed in this campaign. 3 different financial institutions in 3 different African countries were victimized, according to Symantec, with activity first observed in mid-July, with impact on multiple machines at all affected organizations. A threat actor carried out a supply chain attack against the open-source machine learning framework PyTorch, Bleeping Computer reports. The attacker uploaded a dependency to the Python package index that had the same names as one of PyTorch's dependencies. PyTorch said in a statement that the malicious package was live between December 25th and December 30th, stating, "At around 4:40 p.m. GMT on December 30th, Friday, we learned about a malicious dependency package, Torch Triton, that was uploaded to the Python package index code repository with the same package name as the one we ship on the PyTorch nightly package index. Since the PyPy index takes precedence, this malicious package was being installed instead of the version from our official repository. This design enables somebody to register a package by the same name as one that exists in a third-party index, and pip will install their version by default." This morning, TrustWave Spider Labs released a roundup report of what they've assessed as the most active threat groups within the ransomware space last year. You'll recognize the names. They are in reverse order. Coming in at number 4 was Black Cat, also known as ALV, which has possible links to the Dark Side and Black Matter gangs. Black Cat made a name for itself in July by developing a search function for index stolen data in July 2022. They're small, but with some potential for growth, and they seem to be a veteran crew that's learned its trade in other gangs. Hive, a ransomware as a service operation, was number 3. Coming to light in June 2021, the group uses an affiliate ransomware as a service model and has accounted for around 9% of reported ransomware attacks in the third quarter of 2022. The group also replaced its ransomware in 2022, changing the language from Golang to Rust, which provided advantages such as deep control over low-level resources, variety of cryptographic libraries, and making it more difficult to reverse engineer. Hive targets sectors not usually targeted by ransomware groups like healthcare, energy, and agriculture. Black Basta, a new crew but one that seems to trace its descent to Conti, R-Evil, and Fin7, comes in at number 2. The group's use of established tools such as CACBot and Cobalt Strike, as well as its lack of affiliate recruiting in favor of collaboration with previously associated actors, seems to contribute to the gang's success. And finally, the winner is Lockbit, noted for running like a business. Lockbit version 3.0, the latest, added automated permission elevation, ability to disable Windows Defender, a safe mode for bypassing installed antivirus tools, and the capacity to encrypt Windows systems with 2 distinct strains of ransomware. TrustWave explains that that last feature decreases the chance that a third-party decryptor might blow the gaff on the scam. How troublesome has Lockbit been? Plenty. About 44% of 2022's successful ransomware infestations can be chalked up to Lockbit. The extent to which cell phone signals have been used for geolocation and then targeting in any particular case remains unclear, but the devices represent a persistent operations security challenge for both sides. The phones make it possible to collect combat information that would formerly have been difficult to come by, from unguarded conversations to revealing photos shared in social media. The New York Times summarizes the problem that simple phone conversations pose. Russian commanders have ordered the troops to give up their phones, but such orders have been widely evaded. It's also not only the words that matter, but the signals themselves. The Times report states, soldiers did not appear to know that cell phone data alone could potentially betray them, giving Ukrainians enough to pinpoint a phone's location down to an apartment building. Another way of putting it would be to say that metadata can be every bit as lethal as data. And finally, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace notes that Russia has an understanding of information security that's quite different from the one that prevails in Western and especially U.S. circles. It's more concerned with influence, with controlling a narrative, than it is with the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. This view is significantly inward-looking and inclined to view information operations as deterministic. Concentrating on confidentiality, integrity, and availability is a poker player's way of seeing the world. You want to hold your cards close, know what's in your hand, and don't give the other players any tells. A chess player sees the contest differently. Mistakes might be made, but nothing happens by chance. Coming up after the break, FBI Cyber Division AD Bryan Vorndran on the interaction and collaboration of federal agencies in the cyber realm. Our guest, Jerry Caponera from ThreatConnect, wonders if we need more carrots than sticks in cybersecurity regulation. Stick around. And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices and data breaches. With SpyCloud, you now have access to this data, so you can take preventative measures to defend your business against ransomware, account takeover, and hard-to-detect online fraud. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire to act on what criminals know about your business and put an end to cybercrime that affects your bottom line and brand reputation. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. And now, a word from our sponsor, Strata. With multi-cloud, your apps and identities are distributed, making them hard to manage and secure. Strata takes all of your existing identity systems, integrates them into an identity fabric, a universal way for all your IDPs to work together. Never refactor your apps again. Never get locked into your IDP with one-to-one connectors. Identity orchestration helps you solve your biggest IAM problems, even the messy ones you thought were unsolvable. Bring Strata any IAM use case, like modernizing legacy apps to use passwordless authentication, hot switching between IDPs, or enabling identity operation resiliency. Strata's flexible, lightweight, and distributed architecture software is designed to extend the value of your identity infrastructure, no matter the complexity or scale. Share your time on a discovery call, and Strata will send you custom AirPods Pro. The multi-cloud identity wave is here, and you can ride it with Strata. Ready to learn more? Visit strata.io/cyberwire. That's strata.io/cyberwire. And we thank Strata Identity for sponsoring our show. There's an age-old bit of wisdom about motivating people that you can use carrots or sticks. Cybersecurity regulations and guidelines often fall into these two categories, trying to use a positive lure to get you to do the right thing, or a negative punishment if you don't. Jerry Caponera is General Manager of Risk Products at ThreatConnect, and I spoke with him about the notion of regulatory carrots versus sticks.
The sticks are real. The GDPR regulation is written such that you could potentially lose between 2 and 4% of your gross revenue to a fine. That's a pretty big stick. That's a lot of money. But in regards to carrots, we don't see a lot of that. Where this really starts to get interesting is when the government starts to mandate what you should be doing. So I was reading about some of the healthcare regulations that are coming down the pipe as well too, and they're trying to figure out how to build regulations in a way that makes sense. So they're putting sticks together, but there's no carrot. By that I mean they're saying, well, thou has to do this. You have to be compliant with this set of standards or this approach. And that's great, but they're not providing any financial incentive for them to do this. And the reason that carrot in terms of financial incentive matters is because every company has a bajillion things to do, right? That's a technical term, bajillion. They do. And security is one of them. So if now all of a sudden you have regulations that say, here's what you need to do, what companies are going to do is they're going to look at that and analyze what's the potential fine that I'm going to have to deal with, and is it worth just paying it? Instead of the government or these regulatory bodies saying, here's a way that if you were to actually implement and meet our standards, we can reduce your cost or provide funding. And that's the carrot piece that's missing from a lot of these regulations. They're pretty much all, if you do something bad, we're going to fine you. And that works for things like GDPR for New York State. But when the government starts saying, we need you to be compliant with this set of standards and doesn't provide the funding or the carrot to do that, it just creates a really challenging situation for these companies.
Do you suppose that we're seeing some carrots coming from other directions? I'm thinking particularly of the insurance industry, where they're saying, if you want to be covered and you don't want to spend as much money, do these things, and perhaps your rates will be lower.
Absolutely. I think that's one area where we'll see a lot of innovation in the coming year or two, because we've seen that the premiums are rising pretty high. Not only are premiums rising, but the zone fencing, or how the insurance companies are limiting what they pay out, is increasing as well too. They're making it harder, which is fine. It's a business. And so I think there's a couple of things we'll see. I think what I'd love to see, and it's funny, I'd love to see something I won't do, but their Geico insurance company came out a while back with the device you put in your car, and if it monitors your speed, if you're going a certain speed and you're not speeding, you're not crashing, it's a good thing. Over a period of time, they'll lower your rate because they're measuring and actively monitoring where you are from a risk perspective versus how much you're paying. And lower risk, you pay lower. That's the concept that's going to have to be implemented in security when it comes to when it relates to the insurance world as well too. So we will see some of that, but the insurance industry also has to adapt both how they look at risk from a company's perspective and how they're measuring it. Because today they're not measuring at that level of detail or really doing that kind of inside out measurement in general. So yeah, I do see that coming, but there's some work to do there.
Well, when we think about the government, and particularly the federal government, what sorts of options do they have to incentivize organizations?
So the government has lots of different things that they can do, right? They can, for example, do something as simple as, if you as a vendor, for example, are producing a low number of vulnerabilities, low number, highly secure technologies in a good way, they can provide incentives for you to work with the government, better rates, better contracting terms, lower taxes. They got a lot of flexibility there. There's a model, though, that's worked in the past. And it's interesting because if you look back in history, we drive cars. We've been driving cars for 100 years or so. The NTSB, National Transit Safety Board, was set up to help solve a similar problem. That similar problem was that there was a lot of accidents that caused death in cars because there was no security. There was no defenses in a car at that time. And if I look back at the numbers, you can see that, back the death rate, the motor vehicle death rate reached a peak in 1937 with about 30 deaths per 100,000 population. Whereas today that current rate is 12.9. So it's a 58% improvement. Now, what they did was they actually worked with the manufacturers, with the vendors, with consumers to figure out what would work from a security perspective. What I think the government can and should be doing is looking at creating like an NTSB type organization for security, because what that will help solve the end-to-end problem. Because if we don't think about this like an end-to-end problem, what can end up happening is you'll fix one part of the problem, or you'll fix one part of the supply chain, and then something else will pop up as the bigger problem. Play whack-a-mole, with this kind of security. Whack-a-mole doesn't work. You have to have somebody looking at this problem at a broad level. And I think that's where the government can come in. So I'm actually surprised they haven't tried to create a cyber technology safety board to do something very similar and encourage vendors and consumers and companies to get on board with us and really help increase security for both critical infrastructure and everybody writ large.
That's an interesting idea. And I can't help wondering, what's the cyber equivalent of an airbag or a seatbelt or a padded dashboard?
It's interesting. I think it's simple as two-factor authentication, right? It's as simple as maybe a VPN when you're browsing. I know I've done something right in my life. I mean, how successful I am, I have no idea, but I can measure success in one way, and that my family has been trained. If they get a weird text, they don't click on it. They get a weird email, they don't click on it. Even my mother says, "Hey, is this a bad email?" I'm like, "Yes." Like that kind of simple training works. So it can be a simple thing as just training people. Hey, you know what? You probably don't have a cousin who's a long-lost cousin who's a prince in a foreign country that wants to send you money. You don't. Don't click the link. It could be as simple as training, two-factor authentication, basic cyber hygiene. It doesn't have to be crazy complicated.
That's Jerry Caponera from ThreatConnect. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by Bryan Vorndran. He is Assistant Director for the Cyber Division at the FBI. Director Vorndran, thank you for joining us again here today. I want to touch base with you and get your perspective on the interaction and collaboration of the various federal agencies when it comes to cyber. Can you give us a little bit of behind-the-scenes insight as to how the different agencies interact?
Sure, Dave, and thanks for inviting me to join you again. I'd probably be best to break this down into two use case scenarios. The first is when we disseminate cybersecurity advisories, and then the second is when we have an active intrusion with a victim that we're involved with. So in the former example, where we're disseminating cybersecurity advisories, we work very, very closely with CISA and other agencies within the U.S. government, most notably NSA, to consolidate our different threat intelligence in our world, the results of our investigative activity, to inform net defenders and private sector and other equity holders about what we are seeing across the totality of the U.S. government apparatus. If we do that work unilaterally, we have different products that we would disseminate, but more and more, you're seeing a consolidated effort across the U.S. government in bi-seal, tri-seal products or dual-seal, tri-seal products that really do formulate and show the results of our collective work. We do that work because we think that between the multiple agencies that are developing those products, that we can tell a better story, not just a better story about a threat, but also a better story about how to counter the threat through net defense activities and net defense posture. In the second example, where we are actively involved with the victim of a cyber intrusion, it looks a little bit different. And so because the FBI is a decentralized workforce, there is a high likelihood that if the victim is a major organization, that the FBI will be directly engaged with them in person. But, CISA and the Bureau are very insistent that a report to one of us, whether that's CISA or the FBI, truly is a report to all of us. And we are responsible to synchronize our efforts on the backside. And I think we're getting better and better at that as the years go on. And so I've been asked directly, Bryan, do you really care that we call the FBI first? And the truth of that answer is, well, I would love for you to call the FBI first, but it's more important to me that you call the U.S. government and report what's happening, because the totality of the U.S. government's knowledge on a specific threat is really important to understand the totality of the nature and the scope of a threat. But in those moments where we would, be engaged with a victim, there's really two distinct roles. The FBI's role is a role of investigative activity, operational activity, to understand the nature of the threat, other potential victims that may have been compromised, and to take the totality of those findings and share them with CISA primarily, so that CISA can do really good work to share the nature of the threat, the indicators of the threat, general TTPs and IOCs with other net defenders, so that net defenders have a current view of other activity. The only last piece I would add, Dave, is certainly the sector risk management agencies have an ever-increasing role. And so the best example I can give you is for the pipeline sector, TSA is the sector risk management agency. So if there is a significant compromise, cyber compromise of a pipeline company, undoubtedly TSA would be involved with CISA and the FBI so that they could provide sector-specific, in this example, pipeline company-specific use information to those pipeline companies who they have a close relationship with. So that's how it all synchronizes together in the two examples. I'd be happy to take further questions for you, but hopefully that sheds some light.
It does. I'm curious, what goes into deciding who takes the lead in any particular case? Who is it? Is it how it falls into any particular agency's areas of specialty expertise?
Specifically between CISA and the FBI, we both have distinct roles. So within what we broadly refer to as PPD 41, Presidential Policy Directive 41, it scopes the FBI's role as a threat response role and CISA's role as an asset response role. So the threat response you can interpret as investigation, operational responsibility. The asset response role you can interpret as net defense assets. What are we doing to make sure that our firmware, our software, our hardware is up to date, patched, and net defenders are knowledgeable of the latest TTPs and IOCs that adversaries are using. So it's not really a lead role for one agency or the another. It's really a better conversation about all of us having different roles to fulfill the totality of the U.S. government mission. So hopefully that offers a little bit more perspective. The only thing I would share with your audience that I think is important is we have learned that one of the best conversations private organizations can happen before an intrusion is which organization they would like to serve as an ingress and an egress to their C-suite. And there have been many times where the FBI has been selected in that role, and there have been many times when the FBI has not been selected for that role. We are equally fine with either. We would just encourage companies to A, make sure they're reporting when they do become a victim, and B, think through who do they want to serve as the ingress and egress for the U.S. government.
All right. Well, Bryan Vorndran is Assistant Director of the Cyber Division at the FBI. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible. Find out more about sponsoring our programs at thecyberwire.com/sponsor. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of DataTribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. This episode was produced by Liz Tyler and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester. Original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show was written by John Petrick. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Hey everybody, Dave here. We love what we do here at the CyberWire and are proud to be able to provide news and insights that top leaders and decision makers rely on every day. We'd like to give a huge thanks to our many sponsors that make all of this possible and invite your company to join them in reaching over 250,000 unique listeners and 50,000 readers each week. Find out about opportunities to bring your brand and messages to the most influential audience in cybersecurity. Visit thecyberwire.com/sponsorship and join in on the action.